Hey guys, Parfax here, and today I'm going to bring you the best build for any dungeon in New World. All right, let's get started. So today we're bringing you a build that you can run in any dungeon. Now, are there specific dungeons that will deal more damage? Sure. Are there specific dungeons that have more utility? Sure. But this build I am running, you can run in any dungeon. Doesn't matter. Most dungeons you do have to switch because we'll talk a little, well, actually we'll talk a lot about this here when we get to like the gemming section of the build guide. But specific mobs have specific weaknesses and strengths, so you want to play around that. So typically people run a different set of weapons depending on which dungeon they are in, but with this build, you can run it in any dungeon with some minor tweaks. Okay, bro. Calm down. All right, let's talk about the weapons. We are talking hatchet and spear. We will go over these pretty quickly, but we are running hatchet. We are running berserk. Yes, I said berserk because, let's be honest, this is the best ability in the game, mixed with the best, probably ultimate passive in the game, or at least one of the best. And the hatchet has a ton of damage. It is the best single target damage weapon in the game, and it's not that close. Let's be honest. There's a couple weapons, like in the right situations, they will outperform the hatchet, but in a single target parse against a neutral mob, the hatchet is just going to absolutely shine. So we are running all the berserk tree. We have a couple damage passives here with accumulated power, relentless fury, and probably the best one, which is against all odds. We have one fortifying perforating or fortifying strikes here, which is going to give us some fortification, damage absorption by 15% for 5 seconds when we light attack the same mob 3 times in a row. And then we have, of course, defy death, which every once in a while when you die, it just says nope for 3 seconds with a cooldown of 75 seconds. Over here, we are running a little bit of utility with rending throw. It's going to do a little bit of single target damage, but honestly, we're running it here for the extra rend, and we're going all the way down to second wind, which gives us an extra 20% cooldown reduction if the target is debuffed. And again, we have 2 damaging passives here with some extra crit chance, which we don't need the crit chance that much, but it's better than taking the anti-bleed passive over here. And then we have exploitation, which all attacks deal 10% additional damage to targets with an active debuff. Now let's go over to the spear. Now this tree is going to look a little different than what most people run. Most people run sweep, but I'll tell you why I like vault kick here in a second. And we're running everything over here. Now, if you want to run sweep and you don't want to run, let's say vault kick, then you would take the 3 points out of here. I would probably take the point out of exacerbated crits, and I would put deadly reach down here to tenacious sweep, and then over to merciless strength. Now, this passive can be very good, especially in dungeons like Laz, where you're knocking down targets with warhammers. But honestly, regular mobs, you don't really need the extra damage, which extra damage is always good. But the reason why I like vault kick is 2 things. One, there are a couple bosses, especially in Laz, where they have grit and you need to CC them. Well, if you hit them with a sweep, it is not going to CC them, and vault kick can. And also, I like vault kick because it basically, when you hit vault kick, I know it doesn't technically say, hey, hit vault kick, get all my cooldowns up, but with all the cooldown reduction you have on spear, it basically says, hit a vault kick, get my cooldown reductions, or every ability comes off cooldown. So if I really need to maybe get a little bit more fortify with perforate, which I'll show you here in a second, or I want to apply my skewer again, I can just hit perforate on a target and do that, or I can just use it as essentially a interrupt. Now, when it comes to specific mobs and stuff like that, sweep is better because it knocks them down, and vault kick is a stun, so the next person that hits the target is going to take them out of that stun. But I like it in very specific situations. And with perforate, it is going to be the ability that you open with, and it is because it is going to apply rend. If they are below 50% health, it is going to apply 15%. And if they are above 50% health, it is going to apply 30%. And it does have a nice little stagger if you land all 3 attacks on them. Now, we will talk about the ability or the weapon perks here in a second, which is a big reason why we love perforate so much, but it's pretty crazy. And then we have the ultimate deal 10% bonus damage for each debuff on your target. So we're going to apply a lot of debuffs. Other people are going to apply a lot of debuffs. We're going to do a ton of damage with the spear, and we are still going to have a lot of group utility with this weapon. Next, let's talk about gear. We're not going to go too in depth. I'm going to have a video on how to gear your characters out for mutations, at least how I say you should do that. There's a lot of different people that talk a lot of different ways on how you should do it, but there are 2 weapon perks you really need for this build. First and foremost, and the most important, is Fortify and Perforate. It says gain a stack of Fortify, increasing damage absorption by 9.6% for 6 seconds per successful Perforate hit. Now I know you're looking at this gear and you're like, Parfax, you have Fortify and Perforate, Ancient Ward, and Resilient. Resilient doesn't do anything. I know, but I couldn't find a good enough piece of gear to really get that. But the Ward piece plus Fortify and Perforate is an absolute must have, because it just, the utility you get from this is crazy. So you really do need this. I would rather have this perk on my gear than have a Ward piece of gear on it. It is just that good. The next perk we need is Refreshing Torrent, and it's just every hit of Raging Torrent reduces all hatchet cooldowns by 4.8%. This essentially means that when you hit Raging Torrent on a group of mobs specifically, all your cooldowns come back up. As you can see here, we have a couple different abilities that just allow us to get all of our cooldowns up. I know it's Resilient. This was just a piece of gear I had, so just stop flaming me in the comments. I know you guys want to do that, but it just allows me to get all of my cooldowns back up super quickly, and it is just 2 must-have perks on this build. I would do Fortify Perforate first, Raging Torrent second. I know you can probably argue the Raging Torrent is a little bit better, but especially if you're a newer player, the Fortify is going to be absolutely crazy good. Now, my other gear is essentially just warded gear with some things like Vigor, which this piece is absolutely garbage. But we have like Refreshing, we have Refreshing Evasion. So we're looking more mainly for refreshing pieces plus ward, but this is an absolute pumper setup. I only run 50 con, but we'll talk about gearing towards the end. Now I want to talk about why this setup is so good for every dungeon. Now we're going to bring up a sheet here, not really a sheet, but a couple different things. So this is a change on the PTR, which is going to affect what looks like to be non-mutation. So it says, removed innate creature resistances. Creatures will now only have damage type resistances if they have an affix or they are in a mutated dungeon. So what I believe this means is all open world mobs now are going to be either do more damage to them or neutral. Now we'll show you a chart here in a second, but it does say that, or if they have access, or if they're in a mutated dungeon. So I'm assuming this means if you're going to run mutations, you still do need to swap your weapons around. But these 2 weapons that I'm running, you can run in any mutation, which is the reason why we're making this build. So let's talk a little bit about damage types. So, for instance, I'm running Laz. So we have Laz here, and you can see that mob types have 2 different things. They have their weakness and their strength. So I don't know what you want to call it, but they have extra resistances, which is the blue numbers, which just means they take less damage from these. And then the yellow numbers here means they deal more damage to them. These are also the numbers that you will see in game. When you hit a mob type and you see a purple number, that means you've dealt less damage to them because they have a resistance. If you see a yellow number, it means you've dealt more damage to them because they have a weakness to it. So if we're looking at Laz here, I'm running a slashing weapon and a thrust weapon. You can see here we're running a neutral and we're running a weapon that is, well, they have a resistance too. But what we're going to do here is we have on my gear, I'll show you, we have lightning gems in both of them. So what this means is it takes 50% of your damage and makes it into lightning. So we're going to take the last 15 or 50% of our damage. We're actually going to get a 30% extra damage increase on top of that. So the best way I can probably show it here is, let's remove this. If I do 100 damage and, for instance, slashing, and I take the slashing damage away, I will actually do what, 85 damage, because we have a 15% resistance to it. If I were to do the elemental gem, so it's 50, 50, I now deal what is that? 7.5% less damage. Let's round it to 8. So 42 on the first number, on the first half of our damage. But we're gaining 8 damage on the second half. So we're going to do 50. Wait, no. Sorry. We get an extra 30% damage. So what's 30? That's 15 damage. So we get 65. So instead of dealing 85 damage, we're actually going to do, what is that? That is 107. So we get 107 damage here. So we've essentially gained 7% base damage. That basically 7% damage if the mob was neutral. So because the hatchet has so crazy single target damage, this 7% damage, even if they were neutral, ends up being absolutely crazy. Now you can say like strike does 20% extra damage, and so they would do 120, but because the hatchet does so much single target damage, it just outperforms those guys. Now the only mob type that you'd ever have to worry about is ancients, and as you can see here, we can just completely bypass that with the fact that we just put a lightning gem in there and they're done. Now with thrust, you have to worry about Angry Earth and Lost, but you can see here, if we do Angry Earth for thrust damage, you would just swap in a fire. If we were to do Lost, you would just put in a nature. Now there's a couple instances where you might want to put an ice gem if you have like a lot of ice gauntlets in your group, but for the most part, you're just going to put a nature gem in there. So I will put a link in the description to this chart. How you want to do it is in Laz or any ancient dungeon, because the new dungeon is going to be ancient, you want to put lightning gems in there. If you're doing corrupted, you don't want to put, you're going to get extra 20% damage with your thrust. So your spear, you don't want to put anything in there. You want to put just a regular opal, but you want to put an arcane in your hatchet. Then for Angry Earth, you don't want to put anything in there. You want to put an opal for your hatchet, but you want to put a fire gem in your spear. And then for Lost, we're going to put a nature gem in both. Unless you have a bunch of ice gauntlets, then you're going to put an ice gem. And then for the Varian, you don't have to worry about it. And then for Beast, you don't have to worry about it because, you can see here, they're not really weak to any elemental. So that is the best way I can find to show you why we are putting these gems in there, is because they're going to basically bypass the resistance system. And even when we go and they change that system, if it is mutations, we might be just putting opals in everything. But from the foreseeable future, we're still going to want to put these gems in there because you don't have to worry about dodging to proc. And if you get the nature one, it can be a little bit rough. But yeah, just keep that in mind. The last thing I will say when it comes to mutations, if for instance, we are running Gen and it was a fire mutation, which is typically, as you can see here with the thrust damage, if we're running Angry Earth, thrust, fire, they do extra damage, then you would have a little bit of a problem. It would be, you wouldn't want to put a fire gem in there because they will have a resistance to fire depending on what the mutation is. So you would probably just want to put like an opal in there instead of a fire gem. So keep that in mind, that if the mutation is, like I say here, you see the fire, you can read here that they have fire resistance. It's on here somewhere. Yeah, fire resistance to enemies have 75% fire absorption, which just means you don't want to do any fire damage to them because you're not going to deal any damage basically at all. So last, let's talk a little bit about what equip load and a little bit about gearing. I believe I said it earlier on in the video, but if I haven't, I will be doing another PvE video, hopefully this week, unless something goes crazy with the PTR. We know Brimstone is going to hit the PTR hopefully pretty soon. So if that hits before I get the video out, probably don't expect it until the week after. But when it comes to PvE and mutations, there is a couple things you want to get, kind of understand. First, I don't suggest any new player to go light. Light is a great way to get yourself killed. We have a lot of tankiness with Fortify and Perforate, with Defy Death, with our Berserk, with the extra Fortify from the Hatchet. But if you don't know the game mechanics, you're probably still going to die. So I would go in a medium equip load. I would go there for a while. Once you get to 625, you can run a bunch of dungeons, and make sure you check out the PvE guide that I'm going to put out, because it's going to be very important to which dungeons you should do and you shouldn't do while leveling up. And we will talk a lot about gearing in that video. But I would definitely run medium as your setup. I would try to just, you know, put as many ward pieces as possible. We'll talk about that, like I said, in the next video or the next PvE video. But one thing that people don't understand is get yourself Bane weapons. Bane, 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 Bane. Settler's Fend is a great weapon for Laz. Is it BIS by any means? No. But we want Bane, we want Vicious, or Rogue. Now, Rogue is a very finicky perk. There are a lot of mobs in the dungeon, or specifically bosses in the game, that after they nerfed Rogue a long time ago, basically made it to where they almost don't have a backside. I've been kind of complaining about this for a while, especially the snake-like bosses that are very thin bosses. They have very tiny, you know, rogue spots, especially in Laz, where both Scylla and the last boss obviously you can't hit in the back because he never actually turns his back to you. And Scylla has a very tiny spot where you can actually proc Rogue on her. So I really like Vicious, Bane, and Keen is kind of like a beginner setup, but Rogue will obviously outperform. You can do like Rogue, Bane, and maybe like Keenly Empowered will be absolutely crazy, or for the Hatchet Refreshing move is absolutely crazy. So if you can get those, that is obviously BIS, but if you do just do like an Ancient Bane or a Bane plus Rogue is really good depending on the dungeon, or you do just want to be safe, just do Vicious. Vicious is probably my favorite. You do lose some damage without the Rogue procs, but you do gain some damage when you're attacking from the front. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just a video that I've been kind of debating about doing, and I figured you guys would enjoy a video of just a setup that you can do for melee that you can run in any dungeon. Magic, it gets a lot harder because if, you know, you can see this chart here. When they're 40% resistant to fire, 40% resistant to ice, 40% resistant to void, it's a lot harder to just swap in a gem and do that. I guess last thing I will say is if you go for a weapon, make sure it does not have an attunement or a chain or any elemental damage type on it, unless it is the one you need to put your gem into. So for instance, if I was to get an Ancient Bane, Vicious, Lightning Attunement, which there isn't one, but, or let's say it is Ice Attunement, I would not want that Hatchet. Attunement is probably, if not, I mean, it's probably the second or third best perk you can get. Rogue and Bane are better, but next to that is actually Attunement. But when it comes to Attunement, you have to make sure that you are doing an attunement that but you can put the right gem in there. It is not worth getting an attunement weapon if you cannot put the right gem in it. So if you're looking for weapons, make sure you're not getting any elemental type on there unless it has the accordance, right? So I can get any lightning gem, and for Laz, I could get a fire gem. So if you have fire attunement for a hatchet, so if it's like Ancient Bane, Rogue, fire attunement, that would be considered probably BIS for hatchet, or really close to BIS. Refreshing moves probably a little bit better still, but it is very, very good. But just remember, if it has elemental type on it, you can only put that elemental gem in it. But all right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Like always, we will be doing a ton of Brimstone content as soon as it comes live. We're going to be testing the Heart Rune gems. We're going to be testing the rune gems that you put in your gear. We're going to see if they stack. We're testing scaling. We're testing the Great Axe, or sorry, the Great Sword. We're going to be doing Great Sword tier lists. That might be actually tomorrow. And it's just going to be a preliminary little fun video. You guys will be, you know, I'm sure tilted off it, but you know, it is always fun. I don't ever do anything malicious at all. So I know some of you will probably be in the comment section down below and be absolutely tilted that I didn't say your favorite weapon. You'll probably say Great Axe Warhammer, the best, you know, whatever. This is just a video to help out newer players or some players that just aren't quite sure about what to run in dungeons. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe like always, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.